I get a phone call at my house in Redfern, and it's on my answering machine. And there's a guy saying, "Hi, it's Tony King here, Mick Jagger's manager. We're looking for a tour photographer." I ignored it. I presumed it was my mate.
Yeah, you just thought it was one of your mates taking the piss, right? Like, sure.
Totally. Luckily, he rang back within two days, and I was home, and I answered the phone. And his words were, "Oh, are you too cool to tour with Mick Jagger?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not."
Hello, and welcome to the Vinyl Monologues. I'm Tatjana Clancy, and if this was like a dating profile, I would say dog lover, post-punk tragic. I collect set lists. I'm obsessed with gigs. I will talk your ear off about music. And as I was telling a lovely person earlier today, there's a rumor that I once pushed someone into a Christmas tree at a party when they turned off the Pixies. So that's my level of music obsession. This podcast, look, it's a little loose. I've been in radio for a long time, and I kind of was at the mercy of, different things and content and whatever. And this is kind of just, my baby with producer Paul Bissett, and we're just going to kind of unpack all the things about the music industry that we always wanted to know about and meet some great people. So in this episode later on, you're going to meet Tony Mott, and he's one of those people, like, it's fine if you don't know his name. I mean, you should, but there are so many iconic images that you can attribute to him, and some, as you'll learn, that he didn't think would be so big. So there'll be a shot of Chrissy Amphlett that you are very familiar with. He took that photo. I don't know, toured with the Rolling Stones. My favourite of his is one of Björk, however you say it, the beautiful Icelandic singer. She was backstage with her famous little hair buns. I used to sport that look in the 90s a lot. And yeah, that iconic photo, that's Tony's. And you're going to learn a lot more about his career. But first up, we're going to have the namesake of the podcast, which is my vinyl monologue. And it's a very special record, records by the late, great Roland S. Howard. Enjoy. Well, this week's vinyl monologue, because I have to actually justify the podcast title, I'm just going to use carte blanche because, Paul and I kind of work on this thing. We've just decided this. This week, I'm going to choose Roland S. Howard. You may not know who this person is, and that's a crime, a pop crime, if you will. That's the name of one of the records I'm going to talk about. Roland S. Howard. So he was sadly passed now. But he was a very prolific, awesome artist. He notably played guitar in Boys Next Door and The Birthday Party, which is how you might have heard of him. And I guess the best segue into Roland S. Howard's stuff is that he wrote the song Shivers. And I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with that now. Even if you're just a casual Nick Cave fan, you would have heard of that. Sadly, a lot of you might have heard it via the Screaming Jets. I actually, one big day out, walked past a stage and heard the Screaming Jets just kind of pump that out for the first time. And I was very confused. And yeah, they absolutely did a very interesting job of it, actually. I'm going to be careful. Not my cup of tea, but a window into the incredible lyrics of that song. Now, the interesting thing is that Roland Howard wrote it when he was about 16. It was supposed to be like this really, and again, like if you listen to the lyrics, it's incredible that a 16-year-old can write something so sardonic and tongue-in-cheek and hilarious. But that's not how you probably know the song, because Nick Cave sang it in a really melancholy way. It like became this real kind of deep kind of reflective, introspective song, and that's, I guess, the beauty of lyrics for me is that, they are open to interpretation. I think it's sometimes why I seek out music in other languages, because it's very open to interpretation. It's almost just like the noises people make. So yeah, it is a beautiful song. And after he passed, there's a really, really great biopic that I'd encourage you to watch called Autoluminescent. And there's a lot of great collaborators and family and friends and admirers of Roland's work that speak on that doco. And Nick Cave notably says, I actually think he should have sung that song. And he has, and there's a version of it that, we'd like to play a little bit of. But yeah, I mean, everybody associates that song with Nick Cave, doesn't realise that Roland wrote it. And the reason Roland is also so important to me is that I named my second son for him. And a cool story is that I wanted to put the W in because it's spelt with a W. And my then husband says, nah, I don't know, sounds a little like bogan, I'm not sure, I'm not going to put the W in. We met Roland Howard at Cockatoo Island for an ATP festival. He was doing a solo show not long, unfortunately, before he passed away. And I went and introduced myself because, you know, that's just what I'm like. I'll just talk to anyone. And when I said I'd named my son after him, he said, oh, did you put the W in it? And I said, no, but meet the man who wouldn't let me. So poor long-suffering ex-husband had to explain to Roland S. Howard why we didn't spell it correctly. But yeah, I got to like hang out with him backstage. He was so, so lovely. And yeah, it was a really, really amazing experience. And I actually showed him a picture of my then Roland, he's nearly 18 now, but he was 18 months at the time. And Roland was so great. He said, oh, he looks like a nice guy. Like as if he was this fully formed, you know, adult that, you know, made his own like decisions. And anyway, it was really, really lovely. So the reason I'm choosing 2 records for this monologue is that these have only really been appreciated posthumously. So we've got Pop Crumbs, which is an absolutely beautiful record. And a shout out to my friend Danielle, who bought me the red vinyl version of this, which is absolutely beautiful. Yeah, this is amazing. I think some highlights on this one are Shut Me Down and The Golden Age of Bloodshed. And if you know anything about his guitar style, and it's very, very iconic, it's very reverb laden. He's got these amazing, like, I know nothing about how music is made, to be honest, but he's got this incredible like mix of pedals and things that he does for the effects. And it's just really dark and bleak and absolutely fucking what I love. And then this is Teenage Snuff Film, which is a beautiful record as well, and has the oddest cover ever of Billy Idol's White Wedding. And it is so well done, and you wouldn't think that it had such emotive lyrics until you hear Roland S. Howard do it. So anyway, I would encourage you to seek out his stuff. He's also performed with Crime of the Sea Solution, These Immortal Souls. So he, I don't know, was not as prolific as Nick Cave, so probably not as well known, but yeah, do yourself a favour, as Molly would say. Roland S. Howard.
So my guest today is a noted music photographer who deserves to be as famous as the iconic artists that he photographs. Welcome, Tony Mott.
Good evening.
I have to start with, I feel like as a photographer, you're kind of rock star. Well, you're rock star adjacent in terms of your career. But initially, you kind of gave yourself a stage name, right? Like you changed your surname. Tell me about that.
Well, I am a rock and roll photographer by definition, but it sort of was a happy accident. I'm a French chef by trade, working I worked at the Opera House and the Gazebo Hotel in Sydney in the late 70s, early 80s. I was obsessed with music, and I'm quite qualified for my next statement that Australia had the greatest live music scene in the world. I'd already been to New York and London, and I mean, every suburb had half a dozen venues. So I was going out and watching bands on a regular basis. And in those days, bands did residencies, and they'd play every Tuesday night for 6 months. And I happened upon the Divinyls before they were signed. And somewhere...
That little band. Sorry, who? I don't know what you're talking about.
So, well, I'd never heard of them. They weren't signed and they hadn't had a hit single. But Chrissy was Chrissy. And I became photographically infatuated with her. And I practiced the art of rock and roll photographer. What I didn't know at the time was I was photographing the greatest female performer I've ever seen. And I've shot Beyonce, Blondie, Pretenders, everybody. Chrissy.
But she didn't have that persona, right? Like everybody sees her as this like sexy, like schoolgirl vixen. But when you saw her, she hadn't cultivated that persona yet,
right? Just starting to develop it. I think the band were getting a bit cheesed off was she was just singing there at the front of the stage without a lot of presence. But she literally went from one extreme to the other. And that's the reason for the fringe. She didn't want eye contact.
Right.
Lyrics were quite personal and she didn't want eye contact. I learned all this much years later. Anyway, long story short, I photographed the Divinyls. They saw me at the front. They bought a couple of photos. and so began a career in rock and roll photography. And the first one I ever got published was for On the Street magazine in Sydney. And the girl who was doing the layout was there. And so they were laying out my first ever published photo. So I'm completely thrilled. And she said, photo credit. And I said, Tony or Anthony Moles. And she just laughed at me and said, that's not a photographer's name. And she goes, no, you've got to have a proper name. Photographer, are you going to do this? And I said, yeah, I want to do this. She goes, well, you got to come up with a name. And it was literally on the spot. And I said, so what shall I call myself? I had no idea. And she said, who's your favorite band? I said, easily Mott the Hoople. And she said, well, there you go. You're Tony Mott or you're Tony Hoople.
I'm glad you chose the former. Tony Hoople doesn't. This is incredible. So you came to Australia. I understand that your visa kind of stuffed up and you went, you were on cruise ships and did different things before you came back. But how amazing that you're at the Opera House as a chef. So such an iconic Sydney venue, and that was your first experience of Australia.
So I came out in the mid-70s on a working holiday visa. And then I opened a business, which was illegal for a working holiday visa. And I actually ran away. I didn't get deported, despite it's been printed that I was deported. I ran away without paying my tax. And I had a very good time on the proceeds in America watching bands. I went back to England, and England, it was the start of Thatcherism, and England was England's never been anything but grey and miserable. And I'd already experienced San Francisco, Vancouver, Sydney. They were the three cities that I particularly thought were just fantastic cities. And so I applied to emigrate to Canada, America, Australia. I think you can put Argentina in the mix as well at one point. Anyway, I finally got an interview at the Australian consulate in Manchester, and the girl who interviewed me, who was totally obsessed with music, the interview went into music in about 10 seconds flat. And then she said to me, you're so about the tax man, quite a bit of money, and there's no way they're going to give you a visa with that. And I said, it was my father who said to me, it sounds like a lot of money. I think it was only about $8,000. You got to remember, this is 1976, and $8,000 would have been...
No, that's a fortune, yeah.
And he said...
That could have bought you a house back then, I reckon.
Yeah, possibly. And my father just said to me, it seems like a lot of money, but if that's where you want to live, it's a bargain. And so I did a deal, and I got my visa, came back, and that's when I started working at the Gazebo in King's Cross and the Opera House as a chef. And they used to take $50 out of my wage every week that went back to pay off my debt. It got paid off very quickly. It wasn't really
that's cool.
in any shape or form.
But can I just ask, and I know this is an even longer story maybe for another podcast, but you considered yourself a train spotter. And I love the kind of analogy of you like watching trains go through the tunnel, not knowing where they were going to end up, and that idea of excitement and what's next and that wanderlust that you've always had, whether it be travel photography or photographing musicians who are like living their passion. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've always put down that train spotting. I'm of an age where in England, when I was a kid, steam was just at the end, and steam locomotives were just a wonder for a small boy. So, and we had a junction in the village I lived on the suburbs of Sheffield, and I did watch the trains, the steam engines go by, completely obsessed with trains. And each end of the train track, there's a junction and there's a tunnel. One went to London, one went to Manchester. And of course, these trains are just going through a tunnel, and that's the end of your experience. So I was obsessed with what's at the other end of the tunnel. My first train journey wasn't very far. It was only 5 miles, but it was right through the middle of the Sheffield Steelworks. And for a small boy, I think I was only about 8 or 10 at the time, I was just gobsmacked by this. Wow, look at these steelworks. And I think from that, even when I was 14, I was traveling the length and breadth of Britain on trains, looking at trains and, seeing new cities. And then by the time I'd finished England and I was a qualified chef and working, the world beckoned. I've since now been to over 100 countries. And I never stop traveling. I'm always fascinated by difference. So countries, I want different. They can be a dump, but as long as they're different, I want different. I remember I have got an obsession with Coca-Cola.
No wonder you worked in the Cross, right? That iconic sign, for sure.
It's the fact that you can't go anywhere on the planet anymore without being a few kilometers from a can or bottle of Coke. But back in the 70s, it was banned in Russia, China, The best one was India,
Well, they used to have better ingredients in it, right? Like
with different ingredients in it. So yeah, anyway,
very diplomatic of you, Tony. Yes.
I got absolutely obsessed with India and the subcontinent. I've been to Nepal over 10 times, and just I was obsessed with Nepal, Kashmir, India, and still obsessed with all countries. I'm about to go to Benin, Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria because I want to see it because it's different.
So back to, you're at a club, which again, we have to come to the idea that someone told you you'd be on the door and you just thought, because you didn't know what that meant, that maybe someone just had like put your name on a door somewhere and didn't realize that you didn't have to pay for gig tickets, which is just so beautifully endearing and wholesome. But you're photographing the Divinyls, you're doing it for the love of it. And then someone says to you, this photo is pretty good. And not only am I going to give you $20, but then that was their tour poster, which must have been incredibly validating as a budding photographer.
I didn't consider myself a photographer. It was definitely a hobby. But when the poster came out, I can't tell you how thrilled I was. I was completely chuffed. And what was even better was I started driving to various suburbs just to see the poster because I just couldn't believe it was everywhere. I mean, it's a good job I didn't realize it was around the country because I could have spent a fortune just wandering around the country. Just to my left is the very poster that we're talking about, is literally in my office. What's really amusing about it is at some point, Chrissy has signed, "Dear Tony, great first love, Chrissy." And people look at that and go, "Wow, were you like involved?" I went, no, she means great first photograph I ever. It's got nothing romantic about it.
No, you weren't lovers, but even more importantly, you took great photos of it. And as a woman, we are into people who take great photos of us for sure.
Yeah, well, Chrissy and I became good friends. But even right at the end, she still had the power to intimidate me. She was an amazing character and an amazing woman. And as I said before, just a phenomenal performer. I want to emphasize, I'm about to say something now, and I want to emphasize now that I am not knocking Taylor Swift. She's very good at what she does.
I will, only that, no, go Taylor, but the music doesn't resonate with me, Tony, but that's another story.
Well, the first time I photographed Taylor Swift was at Wave Aid, and the management said, "Oh, we want some photos." And they sort of chatted to me, and they gave me a list of what she'd do and when she did it. And I was going, well, how's that going to work?
No, that takes away like the spontaneity, yeah.
Whereas Chrissy Amphlett was completely unpredictable. It was, you had no idea. I always knew she was mesmerizing, and she was consistently mesmerizing. But the performance was, did it depend on her moods? I'm not quite sure, but she just gave different performance to every gig. Sometimes, when I was at the height of photographing Divinyls, I would see 20 gigs in a month.
Well, you worked out what On the Door was, right? So now you know, you're saving lots of money, you're getting in for free, you're seeing all the gigs. But what I love is you went back, you kind of traveled around doing your own thing, like having a great time, height of hedonism, not realizing like people are starting to admire what you're doing. And then you worked with a little band called the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, well, consequently of the Divinyls, first of all, Divinyls had the hit single "Boys in Town." So then and that's after I started photographing. So they got that as a hit single, and next thing you know, they're massive. And as a consequence, to a certain extent, I rode on their coattails. And then I started working for street press, photographing any band. And then around 86, I get a phone call. You got to remember, this is pre-mobile phones. I get a phone call at my house in Redfern, and it's on my answering machine. And there's a guy saying, "Hi, it's Tony King here, Mick Jagger's manager. We're looking for a tour photographer." I ignored it. I presumed it was my mate.
Yeah, you just thought it was one of your mates taking the piss, right? Like,
totally. Luckily, he rang back within two days, and I was home, and I answered the phone. And his words were, "Oh, are you too cool to tour with Mick Jagger?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not." So I scored the Mick Jagger tour, and as a consequence of that and getting on with Mick, I scored 3 Rolling Stones tours after that. And then the whole career just snowballed, because once you get a tour like that, yeah, within weeks or months of that, I did New Kids on the Block, MC Hammer, Michael Bolton, Iggy, Sonic Youth, Fleetwood Mac, Paul McCartney. It just snowballed.
Unbelievable.
I became a rock and roll photographer.
So you're very self-effacing. I love how you were saying, "Oh, I was just I wasn't even a budding photographer. I didn't even consider." Getting back to the Stones, arguably one of the biggest bands on the planet. So what's it like befriending someone like Mick Jagger, who is just larger than life? I mean, you know, you talk about how with Taylor Swift there were like these limitations on what you could and couldn't do. Was it as sort of hedonistic and exciting and just free and easy with a band like that? Like, what was it like touring with them?
On the Mick Jagger tour, so that's not the Rolling Stones, the Mick Jagger tour.
Just solo? Okay, yeah.
I was introduced to him very early on in the piece. Like the first day I was like, and he was quite personable, and it was quite easy to get on with him. One, I think probably my accent helped because he went, "Oh, where are you from? Sheffield, you know, what are you doing out here?" Yeah. So we got on quite well. When I toured with the Stones, the same thing happened. I remember being taken, or instantly given my laminate and being taken backstage, and I walked into a room, and I had no idea I was going into a room. When I walked into the room, and there's Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards playing pool, and I'm introduced as the guy photographer. And internally, I'm going,
no, you're dying, right? Like I would. I met Nick Cave once, and I was just...
I was really stunned that I was being allowed into this inner sanctum. But I learned fairly early on that the bigger the artist, the much kinder they are, and much the access and everything was great. If I had an idea for the Rolling Stones, I approached Tony King, who was Mick Jagger's manager, or Jane Rhodes, Keith Richards' manager, and say, "Oh, it'd be really good if I could do X, Y, Z." They'd put me on stage, so I got a whole crowd shot and whatever. And the same happened with Prince. I got hired by Prince, and
I'm fangirling right now, Tony. Like, oh my God! Like I never saw Prince live. Like. Just my mind is blown.
I can only tell you how much you missed out because he was. Whenever I'm often do talks and I'm asked, I name the Rolling Stones as the greatest job I ever got because you're touring with the Rolling Stones. Yes. I think Freddie Mercury is the greatest frontman I ever came across. The greatest female frontman was Chrissy Ampler, and I also put Michael Jackson and Prince in that category. I'm not massively in love with Prince and Michael Jackson's music, but seeing them live, I realized I was in the presence of the best.
You don't have to love the music sometimes. And again, even to Taylor Swift's credit, it's about just the enigma that surrounds them. And in Prince's case, like the fact that he could pick up any bloody instrument and play it was just, if you've seen that. Yeah.
I did 2 tours with Prince, and the first one was Love Sexy, which was theatre. There was flying beds and he was all over the place dancing there. But within a year of that, he did I think he called it the Nude Tour, and he'd just done the Batman soundtrack, and he had 2 bat poles on stage, and that was the entire props. But he played every instrument on stage, and he was just as entertaining. And I often say that about the modern age. There's a lot of artists that surround themselves with bells and whistles to distract the fact that there's not a lot going on with that. I won't name them that I'm particularly thinking of. And they've done a really clever move. They've gone to stadiums and they've surrounded themselves so you can't tell that they're actually
You can't tell they might not be so great.
The great artists can do both. I've seen Prince at the Opera House where it's just a band, no props, nice light show.
But he can be a spectacle too. Yeah. No, I hear you.
The great ones can.
I'm curious. So basically, and this is a question for all photographers, right? So we all have these cameras, these phones, right, with these amazing cameras, and everyone thinks they're a photographer now, right? So I know that, again, you were very self-deprecating that this wasn't something that you'd planned on, but there's no denying that you've sold like tens of thousands, like so many photographs. You've shot musicians in a session sense, like live on stage, album covers, CD covers, like you've done it, right? So I don't know, like, does that piss you off, the idea that people think that they can just get their phone out at a gig and document it the way that you do? Like, tell me about that.
I think you just have to accept it. The reality is everyone is a photographer now. That's true. You can't argue that. Everyone is a photographer.
Well, I think they're a documenter. I don't know that they're photographers, though.
I just shot Spiderbait at the Enmore last weekend, and as I was in the pit, when I turned around, I would have been looking at 30 photos doing that at the stage. But the reality is they're just capturing the moment for them. But when you actually analyse the photos, they're not that great.
No.
I got really stunned that there was a photographer in the pit doing that with his camera, as in he was using a camera like an iPhone. I was like, I still look through the lens. The reality as a photographer is you've got to know light. You're also channeling, so you're using a different size lens to go into whatever. There is definitely an art to photography. So photography is not dead by a long shot. And at the same time that the iPhone's great, you're not a proper photographer if you're just taking photos with an iPhone. But the iPhone's brilliant.
Sure.
So it's a different kettle of fish. But I think the biggest thing I knew when my world had changed was I got hired by Queen, but the Adam Lambert Queen, and they were playing out at Homebush, and Lady Gaga got up with them, and I was the only photographer in the pit, and she named herself after Radio Gaga. That's where she gets her name.
Yes, no, I do remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, she comes down, she plays with Adam Lambert, she's with Brian May. I've got the photo, and the management said to me, "Oh, you can do what you like with the photos, just sell them to anybody." And I had the Telegraph and the Who Weekly ringing up, and they were offering me stupid money. Anyway, the Telegraph, the guy said, "We want an exclusive." I said, "I can't give you exclusive because I've been told whatever." And he said, "Well, can we have the pic?" And I said, "Fine." And he said, "We'll give you $750 for it." And I said, "Yeah, that's great." And about an hour later, and I know the photo editor at the Telegraph, and he rang up and he said, "I'm ringing up and I'm just embarrassed." And I said, "What are you embarrassed about?" He said, "I can't offer you the $750. I said, "Oh, well, that's fine. How much do you want?" He goes, "I'm not even going to tell you." And he said, "We just bought one for $8 off of a girl for an iPhone from the front." And I knew then. Now, when it came out in the Telegraph, obviously I was keen to see it. And it'd be fair to say I can't criticize it. It wasn't a great photo, but it wasn't rubbish either. You could see Lady Gaga, you could see Brian May. I was thinking if I was a photo editor, $700, $8, I would have gone with the $8 one. However, Queen wanted shots of the whole live performance, and my shots were a much higher standard from that point of view. So my job, whereas that sort of job, the paparazzi and that has disappeared because the iPhone gets it. The actual proper photography of getting really capture live performance is still for a photographer, not for the iPhone.
What's interesting about what you do too is you can have the technicalities of photography perhaps, but you also need to, really understand your subject. And some of the photos that I've seen over the years, you really seem to capture the essence of the person. And I know too, it must be hard because you've got the microphone in the way sometimes. And, how can you get the action shots? And yeah, there must be a real art form to the spontaneity of it all.
Well, part of that art form is the love of music. So one of my famous photographs is of Pill, Johnny Rotten, with the halo.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'm obviously very proud of that photo. That took me 3 nights to get.
That was huge.
That halo was giving off so much light. And again, it was in the days of film. So you couldn't look at the back of the camera and go, "I've got it." And I was obsessed with it because I went, "That's such a great image, but I haven't got it." And it took me 3 nights to work out the light and the whole thing. So, but also the point of that is, when you're on the road with the Rolling Stones, you pick up on mannerisms of Keith. He does this, he does that. When they do Give Me Shelter, which is an amazingly powerful song.
Oh, such an epic song, yeah.
He's got the female vocalist singing and they're screaming blue murder in the background. Keith's guitar playing, he's I'm telling you what the word is, but the emotion of him and the lyrics, obviously, he's playing that guitar and he's getting down and he's like, so after the third night you go, the obvious focal point is Mick and it was Jenny Douglas was the female vocalist, and it's phenomenal. And that's and then eventually I went, "Oh, actually, I'm going to do that tomorrow night because that is great in the background."
Well, you've got that luxury, right? If you're touring with a band, as opposed to just turning up.
You do pick up on musicians, things that they do. You just know what they're going to do. You sort of, it's just instinct. You know what's going to happen. I did a lot of work with Midnight Oil in the 80s. And Pete Garrett was pretty similar to Chrissy Amplet in so much as his dancing and stuff was unpredictable yet predictable in so much as he did the same. You didn't know where he was going to do it. And there was moments where I need to be over here during that song because he often goes off. And you also work out how musicians bounce off each other. And you often see, for instance, Paul McCartney on the road, when Linda was alive, when he was pumping and he was having a good time, he wouldn't look to the guitarist or the bass player. He'd always be turning around to Linda and going, we're cooking tonight.
Are you looking? Are you checking me out? Yeah, that's cool.
I'd place myself in that eye line to try and get that shot of that's the moment, because that's his interaction. In his latest tour, it's very much the guitarist. Now, I'm not saying his guitarist is his best mate, but the two of them are just looking at each other. And you find that with all bands, that there's two people. Yeah, they sort of interact with each other.
I wish you'd done that recent Jane's Addiction gig where Perry Farrell had a go at Dave Navarro. That's a whole other story.
Say Perry Farrell, I do when I do talks. I do a 45-minute talk, and part of that talk is I go, the eccentrics. I talk about the eccentrics, and Perry Farrell is up in there.
Oh, he's definitely one of them.
As one of the most eccentric people I've ever met. I actually thought he was a lovely guy, but my God, I'm not quite sure what planet he's from.
Oh, he's definitely something else for sure. But I know, but you know what? That's a good segue into your association with the Big Day Out, which is arguably the most, when, you know, festivals are dying, as you know, left, right and centre now. But I went to several in the 90s. The Big Day Out was king, right? And absolutely on par with those UK festivals.
Absolutely. I mean, I was the official photographer for 24 years on the Big Day Out, and blessed and lucky. Ken West, Big Day Out, and I both went to England, UK in the late 80s. And I remember being at Reading, and we had no festivals in England, in Australia. And so I went to Reading, and it was my first time as a rock and roll photographer, Reading, Glastonbury, and I did a couple of the festivals. And I remember coming back going, how come a country with the shittiest weather has got all these amazing festivals?
And we're just, we're a brochure, we're a travel brochure. Come here, But expensive, right? Like, it's a lot to get all those artists to come here. Like, the first Big Day I went to was probably, if you've worked with them the whole time, it was the year after Nirvana. So I think it was 93. And it was, Sonic Youth, Iggy Pop, Mudhoney. Amazing.
I mean, Ken and Viv were mortgaging their houses up for the first 6 years. They were unbelievably knew what was happening, and they got it together. All the other promoters could not work out how it was being so successful with bands. A lot of people, in hindsight, everyone thinks they were established bands, but the reality was, up until the first 5 years, none of those bands were mainstream bands. Triple J would airplay, but mainstream wise, they were not.
No. The word alternative used to literally mean alternative. Like, I remember at the time, it was a different era for sure.
But they were phenomenal festivals, and they were just great. A dream for me, because by the time we got to Adelaide, all the bands had bonded, and it was much looser, as in there's less pressure on the bands, and they granted me great access. I was very privileged and lucky for the Big Day Out, and heavily missed. Strangely, I was only thinking on Friday night, I watched Spiderbait and just thought, someone should do the best of Homebake, bring it back, just do the best, just do a one-off, not every year, but do a one-off. You'd sell out, no problem.
So the whole point of this podcast for me is, I guess, just looking at different sides of the music industry. And I just see you as such a phenomenal photographer. So getting back to, I guess, the spontaneity, but also, you know, you've had experience, like you say, touring with Mick Jagger and getting to know all the different nuances. But what about, I guess, those rules that happen in pits for photographers, right? Where you can only stay for 3 songs and, you know, you're competing with a bunch of people. And I don't know, how do you manage those conditions? Or are you not subjected to it because you're Tony Mott?
No, for instance, Spiderbait rang up and said, can you shoot? And obviously I said, yeah, I'm fine, but I'm not doing the first 3 songs. I want the whole show. The reality is, I don't know, are you aware of how the 3 songs started?
No.
I'm going to tell you a bit of history of the 3 songs. So back in the punk days, Blondie, Deborah Harry, was getting pissed off. We're seeing photos where she wore unbelievably heavy mascara. And by the 5th song, it was running.
It was all running, yeah.
See these photos, she hated them. So the tour manager said, well, I'll just let them shoot the first 3 songs, and it's cool, and it worked. And of course, as soon as another band went, oh, well, if she can do it, we can do it. And it just became established.
Keith Richards probably wore more mascara, so yeah, I get it. Why not? Yeah.
So obviously that's a huge restriction, but you can still get a lot in 3 songs. That's quite a long time, even in the days of film. But slowly but surely, obviously it pisses photographers off. But in actual fact, if you can get in contact with someone. So when Queen played, I think it was 1988 or in the mid-80s, at the end, and they were 3 songs, the tour manager couldn't have been more friendly. And I took him aside and just said, I understand the first 3 songs, but I'm totally obsessed with this band. And the reality is, they look so much dramatic. If I go away now, can I come back and do the last 3 songs? And they're great.
Because they're feeding off the audience energy, right? Like, they're more relaxed and it's more dynamic. And yeah.
And Iron Maiden always let me shoot the whole show by just asking. So there is, obviously, if there's 20 photographers, they're not going to let all 20. But if you're just working for the Telegraph or the cinema, they only do 3 songs and they don't care anyway. But if you're a music photographer, you want more. It's a matter of building up a relationship. And most bands, I just did Ice House the week before last, and he and I absolutely didn't want me to shoot the first 3 songs because he's so goddamn nervous and he just wants to get into it. And he said, after that, do what you like. You can, go for hell for leather. So it's just about a matter of building a relationship. Obviously, Metallica, there's a hell of a lot of pyro going on. So there's restrictions because they don't want to blow you up. But that pyro is also part and parcel of makes it more dramatic. And I talked that to a manager, and he put the pyro expert with me to guide me so that I didn't get blown up, which was very kind of him.
Just an OH&S issue for sure. Yeah, I love it.
So the first 3 things are restricted. But when you're working for a band, in an ideal world, if, for instance, let's say Jimmy Riddle and the Piss Pots are playing tomorrow night at the entertainment centre and I've been hired, if they're doing 3 nights and they've only hired me for 1, I'd say to them, I'll do the second night and I'm not going to charge you, but I'm going to watch the first night. And they go, why would you do that? Because I want to see what you do and when you do it. And when tricks and the lights, whatever. And I'll still shoot the first show, but not as heavily. And the second night I go, right, I need to be point A. I've got the song list. I know what's going on where. And you learn the tricks. And most managers and tour managers are quite obliging when you give them the motive of why you want more access. And if they're going to give you 3 songs, please let me do the last 3.
Yeah, and there's more trust, right? Like, and they know that you mean business. You're trying to make them look good. It's not like trying to make them look awful or whatever else. But yeah, it's just interesting to me that at the end of the day, I think a lot of people don't realize, just ask. The worst people can say is no, right?
Yeah, but it's not. You've got to learn how to ask because the tour managers probably stress the whole bit. You can usually find a tour manager's contact numbers in advance, and you can, and you just say, I've got a website, so it looks like I'm not an idiot. I know what I'm doing. I'd really like to do. I understand the 3 songs. Is there any chance of doing the last 3 songs? Particularly metal bands where they go off, but nearly everyone is building to the encore. They're always building to the encore. The sneaky thing about that is I usually ask for the last 3 songs, get the last 3 songs, and there's 2 more songs for the encore, so you get a 2-song bonus.
Do you know, I follow you on social media, Tony, because I remember chatting to you in my Double J days, and I remember when Sinead O'Connor passed and you had taken the most, confrontingly beautiful photo of her backstage at a festival, and she's wearing like a princess shirt or something, which is just...
It says Irish Princess.
Yeah, it's so cool. So I want to know, are there any photos that you took where the artist just went, you nailed that, that they felt really captured?
That's really weird. The Sinead O'Connor one is backstage at Glastonbury, and as she was coming this way, I was coming that way. I saw the shirt and just loved it, and I sort of stopped and said, "Oh, I don't mean to hassle you, but can I just get a portrait in that shirt?" That's literally 6 frames. It's literally click, 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 gone, and that was it.
Wow.
The one where there's been a few. The one that I'm probably really chuffed about was Bjork at the Big Day Out, and she's winging.
Yeah.
And
with the space buns that we all recreated as teenage girls in the 90s. Yeah.
She wouldn't let me photograph her until the sun was so long from the horizon, and she'd come out of her dressing room and say, no, another 5 minutes. Got the shot, and then she said, what sort of portrait are you hoping to get? And I said, I really want to capture your eccentricity on stage. And she sort of went, what eccentricity? I went, you're like a pixie and you're all over the place. And there's a lot of... And she denied any of those moves and then immediately then winked at me for the photo. Anyway, it got published originally quite a bit. And then when she put a biography out, her management team contacted me and said they wanted to use it. And the same happened with Johnny Rotten's Halo. Johnny Lydon personally contacted me and then said I want it, and he got the publisher to then pay for it. And the most embarrassing one was when I was getting emails from Tom Petty, and I thought, well, this is bogus. This is not Tom Petty. Some kid wants a picture of him with Bob Dylan. And then I looked at and I looked up and I found out that was his management, and I was literally having emails personally from Tom Petty. Long story short about that was, I'd always dealt with management. I'd never dealt with an actual artist.
With the artist, yeah.
How do I say I've taken a picture of him, which is a privilege, and now he wants to buy it for his biography? Luckily, Paul Goldman said to him, well, tell him the photo of him is free, but charge him a couple of grand for Bob Dylan. His publisher offered me the money more than I wanted anyway, and it's in his biography. But what I wanted to ask him, and I did email, but he never answered it, was, how the hell did he find it? It was an obscure photo. It had been published once in the Sydney Morning Herald for a review of the concert, and once in Q magazine, and I'm presuming that's where he saw it, and it had my credit on it. But he tracked me down and bought it, which was sort of a thrill.
So you've definitely come from an era where people were still paying for photos and album covers and all that sort of stuff. And now, again, coming back to the idea that everybody thinks they're a photographer and everyone has access to this. I mean, if there are people like listening that respect the art form and really want to get into it, like what advice do you have for people who want to be in that pit and photograph their favorite artists?
Well, the pit was, there is a limit to how many you can sell, but there is a market out there. I think you just have to get good at it.
Right.
And there's a lot of really good photographers out there. I did a talk at Selena's not long ago, and they said, "Oh, would you come and shoot live bands for me?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And they said, "Oh, we got this kid who does it already." And I said, "Oh, could I have a look at his photos?" And I looked at his photos, and I sort of cut my own throat. I said to him, "I wouldn't hire me if I were you." He goes, "What do you mean?" I went, "They're great. I'm not going to get anything better than that."
Oh, that's great.
That's really good. There's nothing wrong. I said, "Why are you looking for another photographer? What are you expecting that I could get better than that?" He's done a really good job for you. And they were paying him, and he was working regularly for them. So I don't know how he did it originally, and I can't remember his name now. But he was a really good photographer. His stuff was fantastic. So there is room out there for the pit. And the other side of rock and roll photography, as in the portraits, there's still side for that as well. The reason I'm successful at what I did is I've never been the best photographer in Sydney music ever. There's always been other photographers that are as good or better than me. The difference is I get on with musicians, because the difference with a lot of fashion photographers, they're used to working with models. When you work with a model, you're entitled to tell the model what to do because that's their job. They're just they're just posing for her. When you're working with a musician, you're collaborating with them, and you certainly have to communicate with them. And you have to have I'd be an idiot if you said to me, "I'm managing Paul Bissett, my new artist," and you say, "I want to hire you to do some portraits." I'd be an idiot to not go, "I've no idea who Paul Bissett is. I need to hear his music." And you'd give me links. I'd look at the music, and then I'd come back to you with, "Oh, I've really heard the album. I think this would," and then you'd say, "Oh, Paul didn't like this, Paul didn't like, or Paul likes that." It becomes a collaboration. When I go and photograph Paul, I need him and you as his manager to be happy. I'm obviously going to, when I take a photo of someone, I know I like it, but I also need you to like it. So hence there's a collaboration. Fashion photographers are so used to telling people what they're going to do. They come up and a photographer who will remain nameless, he scored the Cruel Sea gig at the height of Cruel Sea, and I'd done a lot of Cruel Sea, and I was quite upset that the Cruel Sea had gone. Actually, it wasn't Cruel Sea, it was B Suburban, Tex Perkins band.
Oh, because you did one of their album covers, right?
Lots with Tex over the years. Anyway, whatever reason, it didn't work with this fashion photographer. And I realized afterwards, because when I saw the photos, I went, "The photos are great. Why do?" And John Foy, who managed Red, I said, "Tex hates this guy." And what it was this guy didn't get on with the band, and he didn't think he had to. He thought all he had to do was take photos, and the photos were good, but the band hated him. And that's the difference. I get on with all of Cruel Sea and B Suburban, and when I photograph them, they're my main client. I want to make them happy, and the record company, and I want everyone to be happy. But I do collaborate with them, and I need to know what they're looking for in photos. So that's why I've survived and been quite successful. But note that there's always been better photographers than me around. There's also, I've never been competitive in so much as I'm very aware that Wendy McDougall, who is a rock and roll photographer, is a fabulous photographer. But no one would hire her over me or vice versa. They'd be hiring her style or my style. You can tell that we're different. And if you want her look, that's why you'd hire her, and vice versa.
Do you know what's interesting too? I think what you've referred to even at the start of our chat is just that you're a music lover. And, you know, it's the same for me, to be self-indulgent for a sec, Tony. Like, I'm not the best broadcaster there is by far, but I'm a huge music lover. Like, you can see all the set lists behind me. Like, I just love music. Like, I'm a massive fan. And I think that's why artists do it, right? Like, they want to know they're appreciated for what they do, not just because it's going to get someone likes or clicks or influences. Like, I just feel like if you're enjoying it and they know that, that goes a long way.
Yeah, it's an enormous qualification to be in love with music, to be in the industry. Strangely, record companies could never see that. There always used to be lots of people that were literally not into music. I remember being at EMI and some girl who was quite a big wig, and she was just not into music at all. I was thinking, but it was a job. And I suppose I should be kind in so much as saying she was very good at what she did. So it's fine, but I was so naive that I just presumed everyone who worked at a record company would be like me, would be going, "Oh my God, this is weird." But it was never like, there's always been bean counters. But there was, there's definitely people who are cold and don't get it. It's like I've always found that. Yeah, I understand whenever you meet someone who's obsessed, and a lot of people are obsessed. Kate Stewart, who was a really good friend who managed discovered UMI and worked for the Big Day Long Time. Her obsession with music was fantastic. And when she liked something, she loved it. Unfortunately for her, she was never very diplomatic record companies, because when they gave her a CD or something, and she go, "Oh, this is just shit." And record companies would never cope with that. And you go, there's no way you like everything on your label. There's just no way.
Oh, that's actually one of my huge bugbears, is when you ask someone what they like and they say everything. And what I hear, Tony, is I love nothing. Like, just commit to something. Like, be passionate about something. Yeah.
One of my other things is I remember shooting Radiohead coming out, and there was Bernard Zuhl, a really good journalist.
Oh, he's going to be on the podcast too. Yeah.
There was about 4 of them there, and I was just about to say, "What a pile of shit!" And they're all going out. I'm going, seriously? But that's just them. They love it. And I said they're a bad. I remember saying something like, "They're a really bad version of Sonic Youth," and they were all going, and they all looked at me as if I was a lunatic.
Tony, that's a hot take, as the kids say. Wow.
You know, the fact that I don't get Radiohead, still don't get Radiohead, is near here or there. It's like, everyone's entitled not to like music. Yeah, I always remember Nick Cave refusing to go to the Brit Awards.
Oh, yeah. That was very punk of him. Yeah.
And he said, "I was never aware I was in a competition."
No.
Perfect. The awards things. I mean, the ARIA Awards are my bug, because it's just silly. Just silly.
Oh, no.
I remember the Waifs winning Best Debut Album, and their speech contained in the speech, and they said, "This is our 3rd album. You just haven't noticed."
No, I know. Yeah.
Anyway, that's by and by. Loving music is in. I did a band called Purple Disturbance from Lismore about 2 months ago. They rang up. They said they wanted publicity shots, and the first thing I said to them, "Can you send me a link to some music so I've got a rough idea of where you're coming from?" I can't imagine doing that shoot without knowing where they're at. It's just wrong. The other one was, I remember a photographer who was trying to become a rock and roll photographer, and he was in the pit with Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he came up to me and said, "Why are you photographing the bass player?" And I was like, "Yeah, you really need to get to the music, mate. You really."
Yeah, no, you do. So, Tony, I want to talk to you forever, but I do want to get to, I guess, the fact that you've got so many images, you've released several coffee table books. How do you choose what is documented in those albums? Because you must have, I can't even imagine how many photos you've got access to.
This last book, the new book I've got out now, Gallery, is when I put it together during COVID. And the reason I put it together was I was homeschooling twins, and I was going out of my mind. And I was basically putting together what I thought was the best 40 years of, and I think it's the best of, and it's my own personal choice. So there is things, and a few friends have said, "Oh, you haven't put X, Y, and Z in there." But surprisingly, it's been out now for over 6 months, and I'm happy with my choices. And surprisingly, there's only a couple of things missing. There's a Veruca Salt photo that should be in there, mainly because of the story that goes behind it. But apart from that, I'm a train spotter, so I list things all the time. So I've always got the list of what I like. So it's there. It was actually surprisingly easy. But I am aware, not that I'm probably ever do another book. I'd say that's the end of my books. But if I did another book, I'd definitely get someone else to choose everything. And I'd try and take 2 steps backward to get a completely different perspective of it. Because I am gobsmacked every now and again when someone goes, "Oh, I love that shot." And I go, "Really? You like that one? I prefer that one." But going all the way back to the Divinyls, that first shot that they used as a tour poster, I remember when they picked it, I thought, "They're mad. That's a really average photo. They're mad."
It's in the eye of the beholder, right? But Tony, look, the last question I want to ask you, and I know it's an obvious one, but I don't care. Who is an artist that you still want to photograph that you haven't yet?
Oh, you're going to have to excuse me for 1 second. I listed it in my book, the back page, so I'm going to refer to it. But most of them are dead. There's loads I regretted that I missed when they were around, but the ones that are still around would be Tom Waits.
Oh, you got to hold up your book, Tony, so we can see it.
The book.
Excellent. Very good.
And Tom Waits would be the I've been due to photograph Tom Waits on 3 occasions.
Oh, I love Tom Waits.
It's never happened. So he's been someone I'm really desperate to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, that's it. All the others that I want to shoot that I haven't shot.
Heart.
I'd love to, but I don't particularly want to shoot them now. I wanted to shoot them in the 70s and the 80s.
Oh, back then. No, I was listening to Magic Man at a party the other day. Like they were phenomenal. Yeah.
I got into magic. I was in Vancouver in the late 70s, and some friends of mine took me to a gig, and Heart with the support band, and they did Magic Man and Barracuda. I'd never heard of them. I just went. I remember thinking they're going to be they're going to be huge. And I still, So Heart, I definitely would like. I missed out on Amy Winehouse. That would have been great to shoot. But really, I've been quite lucky. Most of the ones in that list are people that I missed out on because of I wasn't around. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, the band Free is one of my all-time favorite bands. Long gone before I picked up a camera. So really, Tom Waits is still it. It's Tom Waits. If he ever comes to Sydney, I will hunt him down.
All right, so you'll take a photo and I'll interview him. Is that a deal?
That's it. That's more than a deal.
Yeah, I think so. Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the Vinyl Monologues.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me.
The Vinyl Monologues is hosted by the ever-opinionated, only in the best way, Tatjana Clancy, and produced by the button-pushing, camera-pointing, lights-moving sound guy, Paul Bissett. That's me. Many thanks to the exceptionally talented Tony Mott, who thankfully has a fantastic memory, so we can all tag along with him on his incredible rock photography adventures. Tony is always looking to shoot bands and solo artists and always tries to work within their budgets. So if your band wants their photo taken by the best of the best, hit Tony up on the socials or go to tonymott.com. A million thanks go to Sia Ahmad for our fantastic theme music. It takes a special person to totally nail the vague brief of, please make a tune that sort of sounds like a hidden Joy Division New Order B-side, so please do check out the rest of Sia's stuff. The Vinyl Monologues is a Magenius production, recorded and produced on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal people. Visit magenius.com to see what else those crazy guys are up to. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave us a review because we want to know what you think. Email us at thevmpod@gmail.com or just go to vinylmonologues.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back before you know it.